Boom. Back with another beat breakdown. So my plan is to have some music playing right here. So I'm right now I'm bobbing along to nothing, but I'm gonna add the music in later. So, psych no. What's up, Lean Lizzy? Back at you with another beat breakdown. All right. So hope that didn't make too much noise on the mic. Yeah. So this last beat I did was called Happy ARP, and that title is in response to a previous joint I did called ARP Stank Face, which was a way more minor key and scary sounding joint. This one had way more major key sounding and happier and lighter just in spirit. All right. So yeah, that joint was super fun to make. What it was a collection of different arpeggiators that I kind of wove around the sample. So let's talk about this in two parts. Let's break this into two chunks. That'll be best. All right. So I'm going to talk about sample reconstruction, deconstruction. All right. And I'm also going to talk about hi-hats, because one of my good Patreons, we're going to give him a shout out in the comments below too. Yeah. But he, one of my good patrons requested that I talk to you guys a little bit about hi-hats. All right. So let's talk about sample deconstruction, reconstruction. And what I mean by that, you're going to just listen. Just rock with me. So most times it's really easy for me to start out a beat with a sample. Sample is rocking, and I don't know if I told you guys this before, but I don't really loop. So normally even if I arrange it just like a loop, like if I arrange the chops in the same order in which I chop them, I still want them to be chopped because I could do neat things with the swing, and I can affect the swing when they're chopped up properly. I don't want that to be loud. So I start with the sample, and I'm building a beat around the sample. So I built a lot of arpeggiators, like arpeggiated type stuff from the synths, from the vocal keys, and like 3 from the Moog Mother, right? So I laid the sample chops down, and it's like, yeah, you get the beat going however you want to chop it, however you want to reassemble it, whether you assemble it in the way that you chopped it or you reassemble it in a new crafty, cool way. I normally do the new crafty, cool way. So you put it back together, but now, because we did that, we now have a progression to work with normally. We normally have some chords that move from place to place to place to place, back to home. A progression, right? So with that, when I start building the synth lines around it, consciously and subconsciously, I'm building it along to the progression so it fits that progression. All right. So by the time I got about 6 or 7, let's say 6, like about 5 or 6 different synth tracks built in. I'm trying to make sure it's not, let me just check my nose. Trying to make sure I ain't got boogies. My bad. Okay. Yeah. So once I got about like 6 synths working that I built around this progression, around this chord structure, now I can start to mute the sample out and see what I'm left with. And a lot of times what I'm left with is full enough to stand on its own without the sample. And now suddenly I'm dealing with a whole new beast. The beat sounds different. It moves in a different trajectory. There's more openness in the beat because I took the sample out. The sample, like when we sample, normally we're sampling finished works, right? So they're busy. So they're taking up a lot of frequency range, a lot of room in the track. So when you take them away, it becomes really open, and you get to hear all the spatial things that you did, like panning and reverb and delay becomes way more evident when the sample's not there. And like I said, if you add about 5 or 6 tracks of this, or 5 or 6 just complementary melodic tracks, like tracks, that aren't drum tracks, complementary tracks to the sample, then once you mute the sample out, you'll be surprised that you're left with a whole song without a sample, basically. So the approach I used was teasing in the sample. So I would tease it in and bring it out. And that delayed gratification, that delayed satisfaction of when is the sample going to drop is really cool. All right. So yeah. So I built up synths around the sample chops that I laid down. And then I take the sample chops away and see what I'm left with. Normally, I'm left with something that's really cool and sounds like it, is strikingly different from how it sounded with the sample there. All right. And so then I can start muting it and pulling it out. And 9 times out of 10, what started as something that was mainly a sample turns into something that just has a little bit of sample sprinkled throughout. Some here, then mute it, wait a couple seconds, wait 30, 40 seconds, and bring it back in for another transition or another change. All right. So yeah, that's basically how I arranged this one. As always, I sample most of the synths into the octatrack, right? But and I leave a couple to a couple parts to play freehand. And not really freehand. By freehand, what I actually mean is that some of the samples or some of the synth samples are static, meaning that, or I'm gonna call them static in this case, meaning that they're sampled into the octatrack. But the ones that are free are still MIDI controlled, but I have access to turning the oscillators, the resonance, the LFOs, the VCAs, like messing with the synthesizers on the fly while I'm recording the beat out. Now, to these hi-hats. Trippy, glitchy hi-hats is something that I love. Auxiliary percussion is something that I love. If you've been something that I find unique to myself and to some other people too, is that I like to layer almost all of my sounds. So when you're listening to my hi-hats, you're normally listening to a 2-part sound, either polyrhythmic or just layered in a nice way that causes a lot of motion and a lot of rhythm to happen. So the way I do polyrhythmic hi-hats is by laying down a normal hi-hat pattern on the octatrack and then going to the Volca drum and laying down a pattern that isn't exactly 4 beats long or isn't a measure long. So I'll lay something down that's 3 beats long, and that'll repeat and cause shifting things to happen in the hats. But if you're looking to really create pocket, it can be problematic because sometimes when they cycle around, it causes rhythmic things to happen that you might not have envisioned. So by the 6th or 7th time that it's done this, certain things may be happening that may cause phasing issue for you, or just certain flams that you may not like or didn't expect rather. All right. So if you want a heavy pocket, what I do is I like to have the bars each the same length on the octatrack and the Volca drum. And what I normally do, or what I've been doing recently, is laying down 16th notes, like a little clavy sound I included in the stems in the last joint, and laying an 8th note hi-hat on top of that. And those 16th notes under that 8th note hi-hat will just accentuate what the hi-hat is doing. All right. Also, micro timing. Normally when I lay down hi-hats, I start off with a basic framework, like what would a drummer do? He would probably play 8th notes or 16th notes or something like that over most of my kick patterns. But from there, I use the micro timing to shift each hi-hat, making it a little bit late, and making the ones that are closer to the turnaround, meaning like, let's say I'm working with a 2-bar pattern. So by the time I'm in the second half of the second bar, like right before we turn the pattern back around, now I'm pushing the hi-hats forward. So I start by inching them back, and the closer we get to the turnaround, the loop around of the pattern, I push them forward just to catch up with the rhythm. So it gives it this swinging type of feel. Like it wanes this way, then speeds up that way, then wanes back this way, speeds up that way. And that's essentially the pendulum swing. Fast, slow, slow. It rises slow, slow, slow. Back down, fast, fast, fast. Slow, slow, slow. Fast, fast, fast. So yeah. So you can use the micro timing, whether you have a step sequencer, and if you don't have a step sequencer, if you're working on something like an MPC, or even like with the DAW, it's basically a step sequencer. But if you're working like in an MPC or machine format, where you're pad dropping everything, where you're playing everything out, then yeah, I did the same thing on the MPC, where you just late hi-hats at the beginning, quicker hi-hats at the end, and use auxiliary percussion to fill in those gaps that the hi-hats leave and create action and movement in the hats. And that's how I get glitchy hats, really. By using micro timing to shift my hats. I have some that are slower at the beginning of the bars, and then closer to the end of the bars, the turnaround, they speed up. That gives me some swing. And you can even do that on a more micro level, just within one bar. Like if you're doing eighth note hi-hats, make the first three a tad bit late and the last hi-hat a tad bit early, and you'll see what happens. It'll swing the pattern. And you can reverse that too. Fast first and then a little late last. So yeah, that's how I get the swing. And the glitch really comes from the hats being two parts, meaning one sound doing one thing and something else under it, adding movement and accentuation. Accentuation, like accenting some things, and adding movement in between the main hat. So, bow. So yeah, go listen to the track again and you'll notice some of those elements. Recently had some work done on my foot, a procedure done on my foot today. Shit hurt like, excuse me, but it hurt, y'all. Excuse me for cursing, but it hurt crazy. They stuck a needle like this big into the bottom of my foot. So trying to recover from that. Peace, y'all. I love you. Stay tuned. I'm gonna drop more of these. The next video this week will have the stems attached as well. We're gonna do one of these vids, maybe two a week with stems. All right, we're gonna keep that rolling. All right, love is love. Stay tuned. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. That helps me out a lot. Instagram helps me out a lot. Any more suggestions about breakdowns or elements of the beats that you want me to break down? I think that's more interesting. It gives me a jumping point to start from. Suggest them. Throw them in the suggestion box. All right. Peace.